G'day everybody, it's Dan here at Pilates with Dan with your next tutorial lesson. So today what we're going to have a look at is a movement or an exercise that we call the pelvic curl. It's an exercise we do quite regularly here in the studio, and you may know it as a different name. I've heard it being called bridge before, or pelvic lift. Names are names, right? So we call it the pelvic curl here. And so what we're going to do is break down the movement a little bit and show you some of the options and show you some of the progressions of this exercise, because something we do just about in every lesson here in the studio at Pilates with Dan, and there's one main reason why we do it. We do it as part of a warm-up exercise, and it's mainly to do with my client base. So the students that come here predominantly are office workers, and as a general rule they've sat down for a big part of their day. So what we're trying to do with this movement is present an opportunity for the body to move in a different space. So that's why we include it in many of our classes. The other thing to think about is that this movement is kind of like a precursor to some of the larger movements in a Pilates lesson. So things like from the reformers, the semicircle, things like that motion is what we're preparing ourselves for. So we have it in a warm-up, and it's something that you can sort of ease your way into and get into a larger range of motion, but we want to present it in such a way that we can actually work our way into it. Okay, so we quite often do it in a warm-up, and then we'll do something similar to it later on in the lesson. Okay, so that's why we have it as our warm-up. Okay, so the pelvic curl. So the basic version of the pelvic curl, you'll be laying down on your back, and you're going to have the knees bent. Okay, so the idea here is that the feet are just a hand width apart. We call this our neutral position. We've got the pelvis flat, the arms are reaching down, the body is at rest in this position. So that's kind of the neutral position, is kind of at rest. The feet are flat on the ground. And what you're going to do is the pelvis, if you think of it, it's kind of like a bowl. Okay, and we're going to tilt that bowl towards the belly button. So the idea is that the pubic bone heads towards the belly button. And what ends up happening in your low back is that the back lengthens out. Okay, and then you're going to continue that motion, rolling the pubic bone towards the navel to create that shape. And then roll it back down. Now, to couple it with a breath pattern, as we like to do, I think as we're compressing this space, or shortening, compress is the wrong word, shortening that space at the front, exhale. Okay, so exhale to get that roll, hold that position, and then exhale to roll back down. Okay, so if we think about the seated position, one of the reasons why we do this as a warm-up, when you're sitting down, so you have to pretend I'm in a chair, so you've got this angle here, okay, so it's kind of 90 degree. When we go into the pelvic curl, we're actually lengthening the front here. So you can think of it as kind of like the opposite movement, okay, and back down. There's not a lot of muscles involved, but I'm not going to talk about them too much. All I want as part of a warm-up is present new movements for you, maybe something you haven't done during that day. Okay, so that's the basic version of it. It's a curl up and a curl down. Now many people want to, especially beginners, want to press the hips up into this plane here, which is fine. We call that a pelvic press. But I want to introduce an idea instead that the rotation of the pelvis is our goal, and that we're keeping a scoop. Okay, so we're actually drawing in the belly and scooping up and roll it back down. There's a time and a place for the pelvic press, and we do that in classes, absolutely, and that is a separate movement. But for the basic pelvic curl, as taught here, it's a scoop and roll up and roll back down. So apart from presenting a new movement to the pelvis, we also trying to introduce control of the movement, which can sometimes be lost in the press. Okay, and for some people, introducing hamstrings and glutes into the mix and using the muscles at the back of the hip to lift up is sometimes a new thing. And I feel sometimes that the pelvic press, you can kind of lose that idea, and you have to then refocus on what's happening through the body. So I want you to think about the pelvic curl as a new movement to your body that day, and just starting to get some control into the movement, okay, which can be lost in the press. Now, that being said, an option for somebody in a class situation when the class is doing pelvic curls, if you are someone where the rotation movement, that curling movement of the hips is not a happy space for you at the time, and there are a certain part of the population that's true, and I'm thinking someone experiencing a back pain episode, quite often due to things like disc bulges, that sort of thing. Now, that being said, you can have a disc bulge and not have pain. I understand that. But if you're someone where that pain is present, and for want of a better term, acute, so you're in the acute phase, so it's sharp, it's very present in your body, the pelvic press is an option. Okay, so the pelvic press is the same. You end up being in the same position, but the shape is a little bit different. So the pelvic press, you're pressing the hips up and down. So you're landing quite, so the area between the pelvis and the rib cage is kind of very straight. I usually instruct people who are in that acute pain situation to come up and down, and they quite often find that that's actually quite beneficial for them. So if that's you, have that as an option. So you're taking out the curling motion, okay, and going into very much a flat plane motion. So that's called the pelvic press. It is an option for you to use instead of the pelvic curl. That being said, long term, we're looking to introduce that movement to you. Even, and this might be controversial, even if you have a history of a disc bulge, okay? The reason being is that action here in a studio space with that smaller range of movement is something that I want you to feel can be quite safe for you, okay? Mainly because out there in the real world, you're going to be presented in situations where you're going to have to bend, okay? So, and we want to make sure that your body's prepared for that situation. You can't always be very stiff, if you get my meaning. Okay, so that's an option there. So from there are some common advancements that or different sorts of movements that we do in the pelvic curl that I want to present in this tutorial. Okay, so that you're prepared for that idea. Okay, especially if you're a beginner here. Okay, so the standard position that we've just discussed is the neutral position. The other position that I want to think about is also keeping the legs together. Okay, so that introduces new muscles, new movement. Okay, everything else is still the same, you're still curling up, but you'll find that in this position here, the knees want to go apart. So you're having to hold those legs together using the inside thigh. So we're introducing a new focus for you. Exhale, curling up. So this version is quite often done in the continuing level classes. And exhale to curl up. And then an advancement that we commonly use is extend one leg. And then for a bit of stamina and a little bit of wobbliness, we ask you to circle the leg 10 times each way. Extend the other leg, circle 10 times each way. As you extend the leg, what I'm hoping for and what I want you to watch for is make sure that the pelvis stays still. So when the leg extends, you don't drop the pelvis or hike the pelvis up. We're looking for that stability and control. A lot of the exercises that we do in Pilates is all about controlling the body in a new paradigm. Okay, so that's another option for you. So the single leg with circles. There's also at the higher levels doing a version where we start with one leg up and we curl up and down. Okay, so this is your single leg pelvic curl. Again, we're looking for that range of motion, introducing new positions, adding a strength element, adding a stamina element. Okay, the other version that we commonly do in the studio is called a pelvic shift. Okay, with the pelvic shift, we're introducing some sideways, some lateral movement to the movement. And I'm going to show you with my feet on the wall so you can see what's happening to the pelvis. Okay, so we're going to position the feet on the wall. We have the legs together, squeezing tight through the midline. You're going to curl up. And here, from this position here, the pelvis is going to shift to the right and center and left and center. We commonly come down halfway and do it side to side as you go. And then we reverse it. So we lead to the right, then we get a lead to the left for the next one. What we're hoping with this movement, similar to the leg circle version, that when you shift the pelvis, you don't let it sink, you don't let it twist. It's a shift, center, shift, center. Okay, so the shifts are very much along a flat plane. The reason being is, like many of the exercises in the warm-up situation, we're introducing new movement for your body. So there's some muscles at the back between the pelvis and the rib cage, which is a very technical term, quadratus lumborum, QLs. We're introducing some sideways movement to allow them to move. And again, it's a situation where you may come into the studio and I'm looking at the way you move and decide, well, today's the day we're going to need to do some side-to-side stuff. Okay, it's just presenting new movements. So whenever we talk about a warm-up exercise, it's to just present new movements for your body at that point. Okay, some days we're going to do those sideways shifts, some days we're going to do the leg circles, some days we're just going to do bog standard plain pelvic curls. Okay, so think of these variations as challenges of movement, as introducing new ideas to your body that day. Okay, so there's some of the basic versions. We do that on the mat, on the studio reformers, on the chairs, on the Cadillac. All the different apparatus has their own version of that pelvic curl. Depending on the apparatus, and mat is an apparatus, we can offer you different stability challenges, different strength challenges, that sort of thing. we can introduce logs and Swiss balls and boxes and all sorts of things. All we're doing with any of those additions are challenging strength, stability, and maybe introducing a new movement for your body that day. Okay, so I want you to think about all these warm-ups and all the other tutorials which you can view up here. You can see in this playlist. We're also including this playlist in our beginners playlist. And we're including this tutorial in the beginners playlist. So you've got something to go over it in a bit more detail. So any of these exercises in these playlists, I want you to think these are your warm-up exercises. We're introducing new movement, new challenges to your body. Okay, so good luck with your practice. If you have any questions, comment below, send me a message, and make sure you hit subscribe or like all the YouTube rubbish. And we'll see you in the studio someday soon.